Okay, very good to see you all, and hello if you're tuning in at home. So, first of all, I'm going to tell you a little story. It's a short story, and I've told it once recently at another class I teach at, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself. The background to the story is I'd been doing a practice that maybe a few of you have been doing this week, called the Going for Refuge and Prostration practice. If that doesn't mean anything to you, that doesn't matter. It's basically a practice that activates a lot of devotion to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the imagination. And let's just say it attempts to get the whole of you involved in your Buddhist life. Partly it involves prostrating again and again to a sort of panoply of beautiful figures from the tradition that you've built up in a visualization. Anyway, so I've been doing this practice regularly. When this moment arrived, and I was on a suburban train going either to or from where my parents live in a suburb in southwest London. So this was a train ride I've been taking as long as I've been going on trains, really. And it goes between Mortlake and Waterloo. And I think it was at Clapham Junction, I can't remember exactly. I was sat in one of those seats, perhaps a bit slumped, looking right out the window when the train pulled into a platform. And all that happened is I saw on the platform, so very close to my face, very close to where I was sitting, an upended Coke bottle with some of the Coca-Cola spilt out on the platform and a little bit still left in the bottle and the lid scattered somewhere. Okay, that was the only perception, if you see what I mean, or the only physical perception. Anyway, somehow my mind managed something where the ordinary mind didn't kick in for once, if you see what I mean. I didn't have any thoughts about littering or transnational corporations or sugar or anything. You see what I mean? I didn't have any thoughts like that. I didn't tut over somebody not picking it up. I just saw this object, if you see what I mean. So. And sometimes these things are an accident, if you see what I mean. It's almost that accidentally my habitual mind didn't kick in. I noticed that what I was looking at, to my mind at the time, was quite beautiful. So, you know what it's like when a very sugary drink congeals. It starts to reflect the light in an oily, slick kind of way. And the puddle had a sort of iridescent band of different colours around it. I knew that somebody had dropped it there. And again, I didn't think very much about this person. I didn't think how silly of them to drop a Coke bottle. I didn't even think, oh gosh, I wonder what conditions in their life have led them to drop a Coke bottle. Maybe I should be really sympathetic. In a broad, general way, because I didn't know who this person was and I was never going to, I just kind of felt friendly and towards them and wished them well, and I knew I'd never meet them. And I thought, this is what we do in the world. We take something that appeals to us, that's kind of fizzy and exciting, we make a start on it, we lose interest, we cast it aside, and we don't even notice we've done that, and we walk off somewhere else. That seemed to me to be a metaphor of what's happening in our life if we don't watch out. All this I've rationalised and unpacked later, if you get what I mean. This was a sort of single experience that was emotionally uplifted but very gentle. And it struck me with the truth. So it was quite sad and quite poignant, but like I say, it also had friendliness and beauty in it. And I thought, perhaps the first rational thought I had was, I think this is happening because I've been doing that practice that tries to subsume my mind into something bigger than itself and see beauty and truth, and in a sense try to get myself out of the way. And then the train pulled out, and it was tempting for the rational mind to come back in and think, wait a minute, that was just a Coke bottle on a platform. But I thought, it's not just anything as well. Can be a rather cheapening word, just, can't it? But part of my mind wants to say, it was just that, don't get so excited. But actually I knew I'd had an experience of something truer than I would if my mind was simply in its ordinary habits. Okay. I at least briefly experienced myself as being in a world of metaphor and meaning, simply on the basis of what was, I suppose, on another level, simply a piece of litter. I might come back to this, but the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition encourages disciples to see anything as a teaching. So any object, any perception arising, any experience in the mind, if you treat it in the right way, is a manifestation of reality itself, and you train in seeing things in that way. And I'm not saying I've managed that, but experiences like that have given me a tiny taste of what it might be like to live in a world of metaphor and meaning, thanks to a slightly elevated or intensified meditation practice. So perhaps I'll come back to some of that. In the words of our founder, that reflect this a little bit, I think, he says, "It's crucially important to understand that the possibilities of human experience far transcend what those possibilities are usually considered to be." Okay? There's a slightly bulky way of saying there's way, way more to experience than you usually assume. So if we can step out of the habitual, narrowly limited mind into something bigger, we'll realise the really important thing that Savannah Jyoti was hinting at in the announcement, which is that we're creating our world. That's why I say it wasn't just a piece of litter. In a sense, the meeting of a perception outside in your mind is the mind that you're creating. So it's whatever mind you're creating, that's what you'll see. Okay, so there's a little image for one of the little effects that meditation might have. But to come back to the kind of scheme so far of these talks, we had a talk on Monday night about friendship and the need for basic positivity and meaningful social contacts in your life, community, good communication, people who were practicing cultivating love for and are doing the same for us. Last night, Vandana Jyoti extended that into how we become more sensitive to our actions and their effects, including inside ourselves, but perhaps especially outwards as well to others. And now we're coming to the phase, if you like, of spiritual life in this particular trajectory that we've designed for your urban retreat, where we start to prepare the mind for its most important use, which is seeing reality. Okay, so hopefully that's fairly clear. You start with creating a positive framework. All these things can be perfected in themselves, obviously, but we're moving through them as a scheme because there are 5 weeknights in the urban retreat, and that is a legitimate way of seeing it as well. So basic positivity, subtler attention to our behaviour, that making way for a clearer, more uplifted mind that is then capable of looking at reality. Insight into the nature of reality is the whole project. It's one way of putting it, the whole project that we're embarked on here at Buddhist centres. Not just because that will be really exciting or really pleasant, imagine it would be both, but because the Buddha was very, very clear that it's delusion, getting reality wrong, even the wrong way up, that causes our suffering. So he was saying in lots of different ways, but very, very clearly, very strongly, that if you can uproot your own delusion, you will stop suffering. It's not just a personal quest, because if you really achieve that, a natural outpouring of that is wanting the same for everybody, all beings even, and you'll probably then embark on that longer quest. So with the phase of meditation, we're starting to look at the primacy, the centrality of the mind in all experience. One teacher friend of mine is fond of saying, quite rightly, that there's no experience you can have that's not mediated by your mind. So there couldn't really be anything more important to work on, could there? Because you cannot have experience that's not mediated by your mind. It's not just him that says that. So the Buddha said, "I do not perceive even one thing, O monks, that when undeveloped and uncultivated entails such great suffering as the mind. The mind, when undeveloped and uncultivated, entails great suffering. Then he gives the opposite. I do not perceive even one other thing, O monks, that when developed and cultivated entails such great happiness as the mind. The mind, when developed and cultivated, entails great happiness. Okay. So in meditation, you're starting to work with the mind directly on the mind. And just to be a little bit clear about what meditation is, and perhaps isn't, it's not something like walking along the canal or digging your garden. As in that formulation, when I dig my garden or walk along the canal or whatever it is, that's my meditation, which you do here. I sometimes think someone should write a parody song with the line, "That's my meditation," and insert lots of comic things that, don't get me wrong, a healthy activity pursued positively is, of course, beneficial for the mind. But meditation itself is working directly on the mind with the mind, which probably for a long time and mostly we'll need to do with eyes closed in a quiet room. So just to clarify that. Our teacher also says it involves 3 things. So here's his summary of the path of meditation. Concentration. This is all in answer to what is meditation, by the way. That's what I've moved on to. What really is meditation? So it says it's concentration, which means the integration of all our energies, conscious and unconscious. So that's quite a big item, isn't it? 2, the raising of consciousness to suprapersonal states, leaving the ego realm for higher, wider, even cosmic dimensions. So 2 is getting quite big. Isn't it? 3, the direct insight that this uncluttered mind can have into the ultimate depths of existence, the seeing of reality face to face. Okay. He says meditation is concerned with achieving all this. A couple of lines later he says, that's all there is to it, really. But before that he remarks that there's many different methods. You just need to find a teacher who's going to share 1 or 2 of them with you. After that you stick with the methods and practice them regularly. Then he says that's all there is to it, really. I think that's what he meant. But what he's making clear there is that it's something you take up. A bit like if you learn an instrument, you'd expect to get to know the instrument altogether to start with, learn your scales, your elementary pieces, something more sophisticated, perhaps eventually start improvising, depending what you're doing. You don't expect to be an expert at it at first. Maitreya Bandhu says, or I've heard him say, that dancers take well to meditation because they understand that it's a discipline from the start, that you come along to your first class and you will be told some things that you need to do and probably understand that you might need to do them for some years. So it's something you take up, and in a sense, like Bhante Sangharakshita is saying, it's as simple as a teacher who'll introduce you to 1 or 2 of them and you sticking to them. So in a sense, that's meditation too, demystified. I'd add that we need 2 even simpler principles. One is knowing your raw material, to switch the metaphor a bit, and the other is working with it, i.e. cultivating. So there's a reason I say this. In our meditation life, we need to get to know ourselves. Not just ourselves, we'll be getting to know other people probably a lot more deeply as we meditate, but we definitely need to be getting more and more aware of, more and more realistic about ourselves, knowing your raw material. But also, every time you sit down to meditate, you need to assess what the material is like on that day. So try not to carry with you ideas, even if what meditation was like yesterday, on a retreat, even what meditation was like 2 hours ago, because it won't be exactly that now, strangely. So even if you've got habits in your mind and think, oh, I'm really not very good at this, or I am awesome at concentrating, or it's too hot in here, I can't do it, or I don't know, I wish it was like yesterday. You've got to get to know the state that you're in at that time, what it feels like to have those thoughts, what state your body's in, what the atmosphere is like in your mind, and start there. So get to know your raw material, which is always, after all, in flux, isn't it? That means among other things, your direct physical experience. So part of what we need to do with meditation, especially in talking about it, is keep it simple. So when you're meditating, and well, let's say when you're reflecting on it later or talking about it, you need to practice saying what the experience was actually like in the plainest language possible. Okay, and then avoiding the temptation to use theory or fancy spiritual ideas to talk about what the meditation was actually like. Okay, so that's what I mean by getting to know your raw material. But then we also need to cultivate. We don't just get to know what's happening. What I'm getting at there is that the pages might be the wrong way around. Anyway, you don't just accept what's happening. You might need to practice that. Bhante has even said, and he's being a bit provocative, don't accept yourself. Now I know that goes against some popular language about acceptance, which I think is probably coming from a good place and has its place. But he's teasing a little bit and saying don't stop at simply accepting exactly how you are and exactly what's happening in your mind. For example, if you've got a strong tendency to be grumpy, well, that might be a good thing not to be too accepting of. You need to acknowledge it and probably be a bit honest about it, but you also need to cultivate the wish to grow beyond that. So, that's raw material and making sure to take part in shaping it and cultivating it. Okay, so that's some of what meditation is in a basic sense. The reason it comes at this point, we've actually borrowed from a thing called the Threefold Path, the Urban Retreat, which is ethics, meditation, and wisdom. We've added 2 phases just for this week. But meditation is intermediate in that scheme between ethics and wisdom, because you need to practice behaviour, work on the basics of your mind. For example, if we are habitually grumpy or have tendencies we need to try to eradicate, do that. The mind becomes more supple and flexible in that intermediate phase, and we can cultivate wisdom, look at reality face to face, as he says. That's all very well, isn't it? But how do you get started? And in a way, why do you get started? And how did we get here? Why have we ended up... there's a load of theory about meditation, if you like. But we probably didn't come along on the basis of a theory. I certainly didn't. In fact, I'm still involved in meditation for different reasons, for the reasons I came along for. I started meditating 12 years ago when I was 26, following or during a kind of bit of a personal crisis. I had a painful, stirred up, quite upset sort of mind, and I wanted to learn to manage it better in the language I was using at the time. I was quite anxious, quite stressed. I kept getting ill, but there wasn't really anything medically wrong with me, and I was tired of investigating that as the avenue for what was up. A bit depressed maybe. So I wanted a quotes tool to quotes manage it better. I'm only putting that in quotes now, if you see what I mean. I think that's probably, well, actually certainly, a really good reason to come along and start to meditate. I would, because it was my reason for coming along to... No. It's a perfectly good, perfectly legitimate, very, very common reason to start meditating. All I want to say about that is, of course, within weeks, I think as a motivation, that had collapsed into something bigger and more exciting and more inspiring, actually. My own experience, I know it's probably not like this for everybody, is that, well, as soon as I came to a class at the Buddhist Centre, just at the end of the class, I thought, I'll come back next week. I knew I'd come back next week. Within a few weeks, I thought, this is somewhere that in a sense I'm supposed to be. I don't mean that the universe had ordained it. I just meant this is a right place for me to be. So this Buddhist Centre has some rightness about it that I'm going to keep turning up for and pursuing. So I came back each week and I never stopped coming. Realised I was interested in Buddhism, realised that related back to aspects of my life as far back as I could remember. That, for example, I'd always been interested to meet religious people and always wanted to talk to them, but never never found one that was really convincing in any way, that left me wanting to go back and carry on pursuing it. I was staying in Paris once just after I left school, and I went to a particular church, which I won't name because I'm sure they were good people, but I just wanted to run a mile afterwards. And that was painful because it was something I really wanted. Really wanted to, if you like, kind of go somewhere with life and not just do stuff. Do you know what I mean by that? Not just turn up for things day after day. I wanted life to sort of be something. So that kept me doing things like that, trying things. Anyway, when I was meditating at the London Buddhist Centre after a while, I realised I'd been looking for something like this for a long time, and that I had never completely lost confidence that it existed. So even though for a few years I've been going through a sort of struggle, my mind had been rather thin and superficial, and its concerns had been. I was sort of pushing for a really good setup in life and a successful career, and I don't know, following in the momentum that I'd been given. And luckily, a moment arose where it was just really clear that wasn't working for me anymore. Frightening time, because how do you know what the other options are before you've discovered them? How do you know there are any? But thankfully, I came to the London Buddhist Centre. So as I meditated more, I had to take responsibility for that quite anxious, upset, terribly sensitive mind, if you like, for a slightly lopsided development. Again, I never lost confidence that it had strengths to it, my mind, but these were going to need discovering and coaxing out. So I started to ken that I had weaknesses. That might sound absurd, but I'm not sure I'd ever really thought about it. I wouldn't have denied it if someone had asked me, because that would be embarrassing and look arrogant. But I was starting to twig a bit more that my particular mind had its pitfalls, its weaknesses, its patches of itself that it needed to watch out for, its painful habits that it got into. Now it sounds obvious, now that I have a meditation life, but I was starting to get used to that. So I had those weaknesses, but I also knew that I had determination, luckily, which kept me going. So it was exhilarating and quite uncomfortable, the first months of my meditation life. The emotional spectrum of my life just kind of blew open. I remember elation, real joy arising, sometimes quite spontaneously. Bursts of kind of painful emotion, release and tears. Gradually growing confidence. Crucially, little tastes of something freer and a sense of adventure, particularly on retreat. I loved going on retreat. I still do. But that was particularly exciting. I started going on retreat about this time of year. I went on a winter retreat, went on retreats in November and December of that year. And right in that kind of darkest time of the year, I knew I was going into a sort of, some gold that darkness contained. It was such an adventure. So meditation started to give me my first freedom from the particular mind that I'd been limited to, and started to suggest to me that my mind was, this can sound even more absurd, particular. That this wasn't simply life happening or what life was like, that my particular mind was having a bearing on the world I was experiencing, and that I had even somewhat created that. You have to watch out at that point not to start deciding that all of your suffering is your own fault. It's almost certainly not. There are lots of factors involved and lots of, sophisticated things the Buddhist tradition said about that I won't attempt to repeat. So you have to keep a little bit of strength there while you start to take responsibility for the fact that we are creating our own experience. Okay. And sticking with Buddhism was not the plan of my life. It was really not the plan. I had no idea I would, be here now doing this. No conception of that in my life. What I was starting to do was follow my instinct for the first time ever and trust something that I felt to be good rather than that I'd reasoned out and decided on. Personally, I'm not sure we actually make decisions in that way at all anyway. I think we're probably following desires almost all the time. But it can look to us as though we've lined up options A, B and C, and we have a terribly sensible discussion with ourselves and maybe our partner and think I'll go with B. I'm not sure that's really what's going on. Anyway, I stuck at it, in a word. Yes. What about after those initial excitements? How do you commit? What happens after we've burned off those initial weeks and months that are very exciting, probably a little bit unsteady? You might miss them in some ways once they're over. In other ways, you won't. After that, it becomes a matter of working outside of meditation as well. So the way to work on your meditation is to work outside meditation. Padmasambhava, a great Tibetan figure, says, again and again, work on whatever estranges you from meditation. Rather lovely line, I think. Makes you a stranger. Again and again, work on whatever estranges you from meditation. He leaves it to you to figure out what that is, but says again and again, work on that. Luckily, Bante's given us another handy set of things you can do. He says, look after your health, simplify your life, try and base your life, in particular your livelihood, on ethical principles, make time for study. Interestingly, he says not just of the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, but philosophy, history, science and comparative religion. Presumably so that you know what you're doing compared to all the other things you could be pursuing. Anyway, I can't say I've perfected the comparative religion stage yet myself. Lastly, find opportunities to refine and develop your emotions, especially through the fine arts. That's to do with the imagination stage that we'll hear more about on Friday. So if we can do that, workshop it outside meditation, by the time we get back onto the cushion, it's becoming more likely that we'll have tastes of a more liberated mind. And our world will start to open up more. That's a bit like my Coke bottle story, but not entirely like it as well, because we're not just looking for an experience. Another of the really common motivations to come along to meditation is we want particular experience. Probably want an exciting experience, a spiritual one. Maybe we just want to get away from what we're experiencing now. That one particularly won't work. Luckily, meditation undermines our superficial motivations for doing it. If we've got superficial motivations for meditation, doesn't matter, it gets us there. Meditation, too many Latin words. Meditation is self-transcending. It will, if you've come to it with mixed motives, it will undermine those and purify them and root out anything, anything a bit clumsy or approximate that's in there. So we don't just want an experience. Experiences have got to mean something, and they've got to change something. So if we want that higher experience, we all want a taste of that really jazzy meditation experience or dream or something that just goes pow, and we can say, yeah, man, this is what happened afterwards, and probably look good on a retreat. This is what happened to me on my last retreat. It's awesome. You've got to go. That's probably appropriating a higher experience into our existing being. And really, we're trying to do the opposite, which is way, way more challenging. And this is probably most of the path of meditation, is actually incorporate our existing being into the experience so that the existing being is transformed. That's the kind of health warning that always comes with meditation. Is it might be nice, it might be exciting at first. Hopefully it's inspiring always. I hope for you that it is. There will be dull days, but hopefully you've got enough fuel in the tank to keep you going for a long, long time. That's perfectly possible. Quite within reach to meditate for the rest of your lives, actually. But it's so that our being is transformed, so that we won't always like that. It won't always be comfortable. It won't look exactly like us, buffed up and made really, really Buddhist. It will actually change us. So one thing I have tried to do, I've realised, is cultivate at least faithfulness to that attempt. Okay? So I can't say, I was going to say I can't say I've got very far with meditation, but I've got no very precise idea. I know some things that have changed in my life, but I don't know what that's like relative to the whole goal of meditation. I'm too ignorant so far to know that. But I have tried to cultivate faithfulness. So what I mean by that is I've tried to do what my teachers have told me, and I've tried to keep turning up. I meditate pretty much every day. Sometimes I miss a day. I really try not to. Occasionally that does happen. Often enough in my life I have times of meditating 3, 4, sometimes 5 or 6 times a day. But what I've tried to do is keep turning up and keep practicing what my teachers have told me, partly because I know that increases my own faith that I'm doing something that will expand me beyond me, and that is the idea. It's a funny thing because our ego is planning all this, if you see what I mean, and trying to stay in the driving seat, even with a meditation practice, trying to stay in control of what it means, give snazzy reports of what's gone on, and not let it get too far, actually, which is why the higher experiences often come by accident, and why I think it's probably more helpful to think of them as a blessing that's been given to us. There's loads of metaphors for spiritual life that determine whether I have produced this perception of the Coke bottle or whether a blessing has been given to me. Those are equally valid ways of seeing it, probably because neither is exactly true, because they're both couched in language, and in the end it's something ineffable we're looking at here. And that bigger mind that we start to become more confident exists, and which is beyond us. So let me just clarify what I mean there. It's beyond the personal. Sometimes you hear it said impersonal, but that sounds a bit impersonal. I mean beyond the personal. So while the ego is trying to keep things bounded within exactly who I am, what I like and don't like, how I do things, and the fact that I'm always right, except when it would be really impolite to claim that, in which case I'm sure you're right, etc. All of that driven by this desire to keep ourselves a bit impermeable to the riskier influences of the world, conceals from us a bigger mind that's behind it or outside it or above it or hopefully surrounding it on all sides. So again, that's all metaphorical language. You become more and more confident that exists. Here's a little way in which you might taste that day to day and become more confident. When you sit to meditate and you get into the body, time after time, the teacher will again say, feel your body, and you think, yeah. You relax and get more into the body. The exact boundaries of the body will become softer. Has anybody experienced that? A couple of ums, couple of hands, yeah. I don't mean anything very spacey. I just mean that the sense of an ordinary boundary, which tends to look like a body, starts to feel a bit different. It's partly dependent on having the eyes closed, I think, but on a good day, this is an initial phase of meditation for me. I sit, and instead of me as this isolated object inside a room that's larger, which is a perception I'm unconsciously walking around with, there's simply a sitting in a room, if you like. That gets a bit pretentious as well, so sort of sealing all the pronouns out of it, but all I mean is you feel a room and you sort of feel your body, but it's not bounded exactly in a way that you could draw with a pencil anymore. You're simply experiencing sounds, sensations, quality of light, etc. And the thick line that's normally drawn around you is a little bit softer, or even rubbed out, if you're lucky. The next little taste is something like, has anyone had it where your hands feel enormous, or you feel upside down, or you feel you're on the ceiling? I'm listing them because there's so many. I get one where it feels like my hands are miles below my face, but also they're the normal distance from my face, and both are happening at the same time. And it's rather lovely, and it can kind of make you giggle. And all you need to do is stay with it, because it's not a transforming experience. It's just a sign that the body and mind are starting to become a bit more integrated again and relax. So they're little tastes that give you confidence that there is a bigger mind out there that's not strictly personal and certainly not egoic. I've been reading one of those books that contains a lot of accounts of near-death experiences. Have people come across stuff like that? It's quite a big field of research now, where when a person has, for a brief time, biologically died, so it usually means their heart has stopped, even their brain has become inactive, but is revived, will report extraordinary things when they come back. There was a series on Netflix a couple of years ago during the lockdown. At least one episode was called Surviving Death. Look that up when you get home, or tomorrow night if you need an early night. Anyway, it's too exciting for late in the evening. Anyway, there's loads of research, there's thousands of reports now of people coming back from these experiences and telling extraordinary things that correlate. So whereas Carl Jung, the psychologist, mainly worked with people having strong delusions or paranoid schizophrenia or very, very strong neuroses, and started to pick up and develop his theory that there are archetypes in this kind of bigger mind in common. In a sense, this field of research has discovered you don't even need to do that. You just need to speak to people who've been right close to death, or even, in the literal sense, actually died and then been briefly and then been revived. For example, for time sense to completely disappear. So this is just to situate us, one thing I mean about this bigger mind that will stop us taking the sense world so literally, which is part of the problem. So this man, Bruce Grayson, who's done all this research in the book I'm reading, here's some things he says about time sense. He's collated hundreds of reports. He's talked to hundreds and hundreds of people who've been in this situation. Really extraordinary. One of the best things about it as a field of research, one of the reasons I'm so interested in it in the moment, is that it's a random sample of people. It's not people interested in spiritual life, brain chemistry, the biology of dying, anything. For example, there's a mechanic who's working under a vehicle and the jack collapsed and the vehicle fell on him. So luckily somehow revived to tell the tale. He doesn't give details. Or a firefighter at an airport who's going towards a crashed plane to put it out, and then the whole plane explodes and nearly dies. So ordinary people speaking in ordinary language about experiences that amidst this research really correlate. So they say things like about timelessness. Time still existed, but the NDE, that's the near-death experience, so time still existed, but the NDE took place outside the flow of it. So somebody just states that. They haven't been trained in how to talk about this. It took place outside the flow of time. Or everything in the NDE was happening simultaneously, even though it takes a long time to narrate or write out and has loads of episodes, meetings with loved ones, travelling through a tunnel towards a light, a glorious light being, a beautiful light of forgiveness pervading everything, all these things people say. So one person, for example, says, all those things were happening simultaneously, but it takes a long time to tell it when I'm back in my body. Another person says that they were able to move forwards or backwards at will throughout their life in any detail they wanted. Any episode of their life they wanted to visit, they could, and all of the detail was there. Incredible stuff. There's another whole chapter about people using language to say this was more real, considerably more real, than my experience when I'm in my body in the world. I found that really extraordinary too. And those are the only words. There's even a section on how frustrating language is when you've had one of these NDEs to try to capture it, but people say it was utterly real, and this world is only somewhat real. They come up with phrases like that. So this big mind, hopefully we don't have to have a near-death experience to discover it, but I think that this shows some of what's hiding behind this very tightly sealed egocentric kind of capsule. I don't mean anything critical or blaming when I'm talking about this, by the way. Of course, it's what I'm doing almost all the time. Unfortunately, I think it's what almost all of us are doing almost all the time. Luckily, not all of us and not all of the time. It shows some of the potential for that. But we'll have to cultivate faithfulness and try more and more to be guided by that dimension if we can contact it, and there are methods for that in our lives, and stop taking this sense world and its concerns quite so literally. Otherwise it's a trap, isn't it? Living in the body, for example, is uncomfortable. Having to get on in life is uncomfortable. Every day you have to kind of get up and do it again, don't you? It's just a tiny example. I've got either 4 or 5 little injuries in my body. When I wake up in the morning, they tend to hurt. And I've got to somehow kind of come past that into knowing that my life has got masses of value if only I can use it. But I've got to get out of that mind that wants to complain about it, if you see what I mean. That's about the smallest it gets, is basically saying, poor me. That's about the smallest I've managed to make it. Which unfortunately something of that arises every day. And every day you've got to take that raw material and try and work it into something a bit more beautiful. Okay, so hopefully I've indicated a little bit of what's available in meditation. Let me come back to something more that we do as meditators. One more thing, a little bit about what that's like, and conclude. So if you choose to ask for ordination and be ordained, you can take up a visualization practice known as a sadhana. And that's where you're introduced to a figure, a Buddha or Bodhisattva, that you'll meditate on every day. And then in a sense, you're bonded with from the time of your meditation, your ordination onwards. So I was introduced to a being like that, a figure like that at my ordination. And I try to cultivate something like a good communication with that figure. I even imagine that he is offering me friendship of a kind more exalted and beautiful than I've encountered physically. Not that nobody I could meet is capable of that, but I imagine that the ultimate blessings of the wisest friendship are coming towards me and even flowing into me. And part of the imagination aspect of the practice is that what that figure is transmitting to me, in the time of the meditation, I understand and can inhabit, basically. So I at least imagine that to try and get into that state. Eventually, you can study whether that is outside you or inside you, or something more like neither. Because if you imagine, or let's take the Metta Bhavana, you imagine your friend becoming more and more radiantly happy. You're doing that with your mind, sitting with your eyes closed in a shrine room. But that doesn't mean it's not real. The friend may not know about it, but in a sense the friend is not all of your experience of them. You're conjuring a really more vivid experience of them while you sit in the meditation. And your literal experience of them when you meet them will be coloured by that. So that relationship has an inner aspect and an outer aspect. And you can't in the end say it's happening on the inside or the outside. It's happening in some very hard to define meeting between the two. So what meditation ultimately gets at, and here's a little trailer for tomorrow, is it starts to break down your ideas of here's inside, there's outside, which is what all of that stuff is based on that Vandana was telling us about so capably, so wonderfully last night, which causes me to want certain things, push other things away, compete with others, dislike others, or like them for my own advantages, all in order to protect this thing that I believe is in here. In Buddhism, that's a delusion that you're trying to break. So, if you imagine a beautiful or radiant being, whether that's your friend in the Metta Bhavana or a Buddha or Bodhisattva in a visualization practice, you could say, that force is outside you and you need to accept its blessings. You could say, that is the best expression of your higher mind and your aspiration, and you are trying to move towards it. All of these modes of seeing it have got their limits, because in the end we will try to go beyond them. So, I won't try and describe actually the culmination of that type of practice, partly because I'm not sure I've understood it. But it is something like the merging and the melting of those ideas and becoming something more like the beauty that you've been imagining. In one part of the tradition, there's a lovely, very moving story, which I haven't got time to tell in full, the myth of the return journey, in which an estranged son who's become very poor, gradually, and his father recognises him, he's lost for years, his father recognises him. The father decides to give him a bit of work on his estate. The son gradually becomes familiar. He's very frightened at first by all the wealth. Gradually comes closer to the house and the estate, starts spending more time there. starts to manage the father's affairs, starts to accept more pay. Eventually the father reveals to everybody, this is in fact my son, and the father can then die. What's happened there is the son has come fully into his inheritance, and that's a metaphor for our true inheritance that we're trying to penetrate to in our meditation practice. It has nothing to do with working our way up or status or wealth. It's to do with realising that our true inheritance is something not outside us that we're trying to get and incorporate inwards, not inside us that we're trying to sort of buff up and make more shiny and show off outwards. We can't say what it is. We can probably only trust that it's in the bigger mind that we think is outside us or beyond us, or however you want to put it. Okay, just one more little hint of my own. This is a dream, but don't worry, it's not a long one. Touches of this, I think. I mention dreams because touches of this stuff will become available, I think, without too much difficulty in your meditation practice, on retreat, but also in dreams. There wasn't much content. I simply saw a huge shape above me, and I knew in the dream, instinctively and immediately, that it was everything I'd been missing and getting wrong in life. And in the dream, I completely understood. It was a large, beautiful presence hovering above me, and it was a very, very deep green colour. So deep it was almost black. I don't know what that means. And I think there was a slightly starry sky around it. But that's it. There's no other story, no other image. I simply knew and twigged all of a sudden, a bit like these people do in their near-death experiences, I've just been getting it wrong. It's nobody's fault. I'm not going to get down about it. At a certain point, we probably can't anymore, which would be nice, wouldn't it? I've simply been getting it wrong. I've been getting it the wrong way up. The Buddha often talked about something being set the right way up. Just been seeing it the wrong way. So I hope that through practicing meditation more and more, we can get more into this imaginative aspect, connect more with that bigger mind that we can trust is outside or beyond us, and then be ready to cultivate wisdom, which you'll hear more about tomorrow night. So I hope that gives you something to go on. Before finishing, I want to finish with Sangharakshita's words, actually, because they are probably more fitting than mine. So here's his suggestion of that world that's within reach. Okay, it's called Above Me Broods. His poem, Above Me Broods. Above me broods a world of mysteries and magnitudes. I see, I hear, more than what strikes the eye or meets the ear. Within me sleep potencies deep, unfathomably deep, which, when awake, the bonds of life, death, time and space will break. Infinity above me, like the blue sky, do I see. Below, in me, lies the reflection of infinity. Okay, thank you very much.